Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? Sorry for the delayed start as always, but I appreciate you coming in today and checking out the stream. If you're new to the stream, let me know. If not, it's always good to see everyone as usual. I really appreciate it. And today I wanted to talk about my experience at the air show, the Air Force Base, 5 minutes from my house. I mean, it's literally, I could walk there, but um, they have they had their, I guess it's their 75th anniversary, but whatever it was, they had their air show, and they do it once a year typically, but it's been out the last 2 or 3 years, and I haven't had the opportunity to go, and I've lived here my whole life, and I've never gone to the air show because I don't know, it just I don't like crowds and dealing with loud noises because living next to an Air Force base and then three other major airports in the area, I'm just constantly inundated with just jet sounds, and particularly because of the Air Force base, the Coast Guard is there, and it's just constant helicopters, and they fly really low, right over my backyard a lot of times. And that's kind of where I wanted to start is they were practicing all week, uh, flying over. And I was able to capture a few shots on one of the days, and they came out really well. I think I was really surprised. And if you guys follow me on Flickr or Instagram, you may have seen them already. Some of the shots, and I heavily edited them to the point, with fake skies and everything, but they look okay. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about my experience. Well, the settings I used and things, because you can watch a lot of aviation photography videos on YouTube, and they talk about shooting jet planes versus propeller planes, and trying to show propeller blur. But there was a couple other things that were kind of new to me. Um, you know, because I shoot birds, right? I do birds in flight, and I'm fairly competent with that. Thanks to the OM-1, I should say, because of the bird tracking. So this was a good opportunity to test the airplane tracking, and I can say that it's just as good as the bird tracking. Now, it did struggle a little bit with a couple of formations or a couple of forms that the jets fly in, because you don't see the wingspan, and the wingspans on these fighter jets are very small, right? Uh, so it and it they were primarily F-16s, is the sort of the main fighter jet that everyone uses. And I was surprised to learn that uh, they've been around since, I think, 1979. I mean, it's not a new design by any means. They just keep updating the electronics inside, but the main body and the jets and uh, payload and everything about the fighter jet itself has remained relatively untouched. Um, like I said, they've expanded some of the low capacity so it can do multiple types of missions other than just like dogfighting, which is kind of, sort of the what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like what we think about when we think about fighter jets is we think about dogfighting. And the replacement to the F-16 is already here. There's actually been two. The F-22 Raptor, which has been sort of discontinued, and then the F-35A, which is a totally different kind of fighter. It can dogfight and is fairly competent against an F-16, but in 2015, they were testing them out, and F-16 beat the new F-35A in a dogfight. But the F-35 is not uh, designed specifically for dogfighting, because they say that's kind of old school type warfare. That the future really of warfare is really about coming in stealthy, so that they never knew you came, and then uh, destroying targets from a distance, or doing it without being noticed until it actually happens, of course. And they say that if you get into a dogfight, it's either bad luck or bad decisions by the pilot, because that's not usually the mission anymore, is to go into a dogfight. Whereas the F-16 is definitely capable of that. It's also been sort of transformed into more of a multi-mission type aircraft, but it doesn't have the technology and stealth of the F-35. So we'll look at a couple of pictures. Those are the two primary planes that I took pictures of, and they fly pretty fast, during the air show. And I shot primarily with, I'll show you my setup. Let's get into the photography part. This is what I shot, of course, is my OM-1 with the 300 millimeter f4 Pro. I think a 100 to 400 zoom would have been a better choice, because I ended up having to walk back pretty far to get some of the shots, because they fly, when I was front and center in the field, they fly pretty close, and I just couldn't get them in the frame with this, and I kept backing up, and I missed a lot of shots like that. I also brought the 75 to 300, which is a very competent lens, and I got some decent shots with that one, but clearly it's not anywhere near the image quality of the 300 f4 Pro. So I primarily shot with that. So I'll show you some pictures from both lenses. And I also brought the 12 to 40 Pro, which I used a little bit, and the 8mm fisheye, because you have the opportunity to go inside some of the aircraft, and the cockpit is usually very tight. So I figured a fisheye lens would get everything in at once. So I think that's where I'll start, is just with a few pictures. Well, actually, let me start with a quick video. And I don't know if there's going to be audio or not, but it's, just imagine jet sounds. I did very little video. I did a little bit at the beginning, and then for whatever reason, I could not get subject detect to work in video. I don't know what setting I'm missing. I'm gonna have to look at it today and figure out why I couldn't, because I've done it before with birds, but for some reason I could not activate the subject detect in video. What I should have done is just done a full reset of the camera and just started over from there, because there's apparently some setting I'm using that's conflicting with the subject detect that I just, at the time, my brain just couldn't work it out, because I was so focused. I didn't know what was going to happen. And it's so loud, and I had to be on high alert, right? Like, what direction is the plane coming from? So I was kind of at my mental limit in terms of photography, because it's all new. If they're having this show again today, you might actually even hear some of the jets fly over because they're so loud. I might go back today if it's not too crowded. I mean, there's no way of knowing that, but the actual main show, the Thunderbirds and stuff, come out at 2 o'clock. So that's a couple hours after I usually finish the stream. And between 12 and 2, it's kind of a mixed bag of like smaller craft. Maybe the F-35 might come out, and some helicopter and parachuting and stuff. All good stuff, right? But the main show is, of course, the actual Thunderbirds, which is a 6. And there's one flying over now. There's 6 F-16s. Okay, so let me just show you a short clip, and I'll try and narrate it. It's only 30 seconds, and it's not much. So let's get this out of the way, right? Yeah, here we are. So this was the crowd, right? This was on Friday. I went on Friday, which was, I don't think was, obviously it was a work day, so it was the least crowded day. Yesterday, when they had the show, they actually shut the gates down around 12 noon, only a couple hours after the show started, because it was already overcrowded. So I can only imagine today would be the same, because people that couldn't go yesterday might try and come back today, right? it wasn't too bad. This is the Coast Guard. I see them every day fly over my house. This is the maintenance crew for the F-16s, and you know they have their little drills here in formation for the show. And this is the F-16s just before they take off. And I recorded this with my 300 millimeter f4 Pro and the OM-1. And now it's just kind of looping back. They did a little demo there where the guy dropped down, then they brought a cage up. And then watch these guys turn around and smile. They're so happy. And you can see the pilots. And there was one female pilot there. At least one. I noticed one. It's hard to tell when they're all in their flight suits and everything. So that was that. And I think I was really happy with the video quality that I got with the few clips that I was able to get. Because like I said, I didn't take a lot of video. I'm going to try and make a little maybe 5-minute video with a montage of some of the video clips I took and some of the photos, and maybe talk about it a little bit more in a video. But you're going to get most of that here during the stream, right? So if you're watching the stream, you probably don't really need to watch that if you can hang out for the whole stream. But if you want a 5-minute recap of this, what I'm doing today, I'll probably put it into a video. So we'll see how excuse me, we'll see how that goes. So let me close this down and bring up my photos. And I haven't had a chance to call these a whole lot, meaning, you know, cherry pick the ones. I've cherry picked the obvious ones. I ended up taking 7,000 pictures. So here's a few tips, right? That and a few question marks that I need to work out if I ever get the chance to go shoot again. This kind of subject, right? But the general consensus is propeller planes, you need to be between like 1/125th of a second and 1/500th of a second, because depending on how fast the propellers are spinning is going to dictate how much motion blur you get. Because people like to see the motion blur in the propeller for the photos. And there's people that like to freeze the action. I mean, it looks a little weird sometimes when a plane's flying and the propellers are not turning. So I'm leaning towards, I like to show propeller blur. But the problem is your panning skills, you know, have to be really good. And this is the first time I've shot this, so I had a lot of bad shots with the propeller planes, meaning everything was blurry, not just the propellers, because I wasn't able to pan properly. And so the planes themselves came out blurry. And so that's shutter speed. Shutter speed for the jets and things, I would say at least 1/4000th of a second. If you're just starting out, if you can shoot at 1/8000th, all the better. It's going to depend on your lens, your f-stop, your ISO, all of that, right? Most of the time, I think most of my shots ended up between ISO 200 and 400. There's a couple outliers higher than that, because I shot in shutter priority with auto ISO. So I just let the camera deal with the ISO, and I just dialed in exposure comp based on what I could see. Because in the field, when I was on the airfield, on the left side, if the planes were coming in from the left side, the lighting was better, meaning the sun was shining on the plane from the top and giving me nice light, versus when they were coming in from the right side, and and they came equally from both sides. You were getting the strong backlighting from the sun, and I had to dial in minimum +1 EV, but +2 EV would have been better. And when you do that, of course, your ISO goes up by 2 stops, right? Potentially. Okay. So I posted most of these, the cherry picked ones on Flickr, and then we'll go through some of the other ones. Okay, so that was the shutter speed settings, auto ISO. IBIS I have question marks on. I just put it on auto IBIS, right? So I let the lens and the camera sync and just work its magic. And theoretically, you can get better performance with IBIS if you can set it to the direction you're panning, which I did not do because I was just, like I said, I just never been to an air show, so I wanted to try to minimize the things I had to think about. But I think at 1/4000th or higher, you might be able to get away with turning IBIS off. So I want to try that, shoot with IBIS off, because some of the pictures, there's motion blur at very high shutter speeds, which I wouldn't expect. And not a motion blur with respect to because the subject's moving too fast, but motion blur like camera shake. And I don't know if that's coming from the IBIS system, or if it's, or if 1/4000th of a second's not fast enough. I don't have a feel for that. And there's lots of videos online about this, but you have to know through the experience of using your camera and lens combination what kind of performance the camera is going to give you. And it's not only a camera and lens performance, but also the photographer performance, right? Because shooting air shows, the skill set is not particularly difficult, right? Just learn to pan and find the subject in the sky, and the camera does most of the work. But the experience and getting good at that skill set is a whole different thing. And that's something I don't have a lot of experience with, is shooting fighter jets, right? Now, I should caveat that I did go to one air show last year, which was just some old World War I propeller planes. Piece of cake to shoot those. That's easier than shooting birds in flight. But fighter jets, man, that's a whole different thing when they're coming in maybe 100 meters away from you. They're not that far away, and they're flying by at like 500 miles an hour, some crazy speed. And it's loud. So wear ear protection, either earplugs or those headphone things, because it is so loud. I mean, I'm not a jumpy person, but man, sometimes you don't hear the jets coming, and all of a sudden there's this big boom, like this loud sound that just makes you jump a mile. After the first couple, I wasn't jumping anymore, but the first one got me. I was like, whoa, Jesus, holy crap. That scared the crap out of me. But okay, let's look at some pictures, and I'll talk about these. Let me think. I think that's it for camera settings. And then I had airplane detect on. Airplane detect, okay. When you could clearly see the wingspan, airplane detect was awesome. And a lot of times when it's coming straight on, it would find the subject, but not quite as well. Versus, when the wingspans are, when the plane is flat against you, then you could easily, the airplane detect easily caught that, whether it was one plane or multiple planes, it just got it. So the autofocus I had no problems with at all. And when they're coming in from very far away straight on like this, the autofocus didn't pick it up all the time. And that's because it's kind of hazy out, so there's not a lot of contrast, and they're only filling like maybe 5% of the frame at that point, if that. But once they got in a little closer, then it would start to pick up and lock on. And so I can tell you that the OM-1 autofocus was no problem. Now, if you don't have the OM-1 or any kind of airplane detect, like on the OM-1 and EM-1X, say you're shooting EM-1 Mark II or EM-1 Mark III or EM-5 Mark III, just put it in like a small square, like a 3x3 grid, and track it yourself manually, and use continuous autofocus without tracking. Just continuous autofocus, and you'll have to track it yourself manually. And I'm sure you'll get fine results that way. I wanted to try to bring 2 cameras so I could test out, using the regular continuous autofocus versus using subject detect. But with my experience with bird photography, I would imagine that translates to jet photography, right? Airplane photography. The performance is going to be pretty similar if you're good at tracking manually. So you don't have to worry about that too much. You don't have to have an OM-1. The other thing is continuous shutter, right? The OM-1 can shoot 50 frames per second with this lens, 25 frames per second on most other lenses. And you don't need that, except on a couple of maneuvers that they do. You really don't need to be faster than, say, 10 frames per second, because you'll end up with 7,000 images like I did, because I stayed at 50 or 25 frames per second the whole time, bursting. I stayed mostly at 25 frames per second, but I ended up with 7,000 images, probably, 6,900 of them. I'm not gonna, or, very small percentage of them are actually ones that are worth keeping and sharing, right? Most of the other ones, the plane will be too far away, or the lighting is terrible, or the focus might be slightly off, or the motion blur, all kinds of other nonsense, right? So if you can knock it down to, I would argue you could even go to 5 frames per second in a lot of cases. So it was a totally amateur spray and pray moment for me, or day for me, because again, I was never shot a show before. So I think if I get the opportunity to go again, maybe today, maybe next year, I'm not going to shoot at 25 frames per second, except for the maneuvers where they come together and fly over the top of each other, or on, above, below, under, cross. They have all these maneuvers where if you're in the center of the field, that's where they time these really fancy kind of things. And I did get a couple of shots I'll show you. So let's just go to that. I'm just going to go to my Flickr page. Okay. So this is the F-35. This is the, ultimately, this will probably be the replacement to the F-16. And all the EXIF data is here. But 300 F4 Pro at F4, and I was shooting at F4 and F5.6, because once in a blue moon I did switch to manual mode just to lock the aperture at F5.6, but then I decided that the lower ISO is more critical than, say, depth of field, because I did have some depth of field issues as well, even at F4, which is an F8 equivalent, but I did have some depth of field issues because the planes are relatively large. They're 50 feet long, 30 feet wide, right? Full wingspan. And then they're only like 100 feet in front of you, right? They're like right in front of you. So this image here, this one I pretty much filled the frame. You can see I'm at 32 by 32. So, the full frame is 3888, right? Tall. And this frame is at 3238. And you can download all these, right? I didn't put any locks on. If you want to download the full res JPEGs, you can from the Flickr page. For personal use, right? I mean, obviously don't sell my pictures and try to make money off me. But yeah, let's just punch in. So, and I'll pause it here so that the video can catch up, because I know it pixelates sometimes when you move things around. But I can clearly read the, you know, the pilot's name and other things on there, the numbers. And this plane is designed to be stealthy, so that's why it's this dark gray color, and it's got these sharp angles to help reduce its radar reflectivity or whatever. And it's got these fancy sensors all over the plane for doing different things. Like here it says danger, arresting hook. And these were all processed in Photolab 5. I'll show you the raw images just so you get a feel of the difference between this and the raw. It takes quite a bit of processing to get the images to look really clean. And I could probably still do more with this image, actually. I didn't really pixel peep it as much because I was rushing to get these out. But yeah, this image came out really well. And I think this is typical of what you can expect if you do everything right and get everything right and nail focus and fill the frame and get the exposure right. Because this doesn't show the exposure compensation here. But you can see I was at ISO 800, so I probably dialed in at least one, maybe two stops of exposure comp, so the ISO cranks up, right, from base. Even though it was a bright sunny day, right, midday sun. Let's go to the next one. And the sky was overexposed. So the clouds and things you see here, I added later, right, with Photoshop. I just did sky replacement. And I tried to be subtle most of the time, just to get the blue sky back. So this sky is fake, all right? This sky is fake. And this shot, I didn't fill the frame as much because if you look at the dimensions, well, it says 3888. Maybe this was, okay. So 3888 is the tall dimension of our sensor, right? 20 megapixel sensor. And if we punch in, yeah, I did fill the frame with this pretty much. Again, good detail. You can see the writing here. It says no step. You can see the pilot here. Can't quite read the naming or anything, text here on the side. It's just mushy, but you can see there's text there, right? And they say if you use a polarizer filter, I didn't have one for this in that filter size. Otherwise, I would have used a polarizer. It'll help reduce the reflections, right? So you can see inside the pilot's cockpit better in this kind of shot. And also help reduce reflections on the plane itself, you know, so you get more contrast and better details. So that's another thing is I'm gonna try and find a polarizer filter for my lens, so that I can, you know, potentially get better shots. But I'm gonna have to buy a good one, right? Like a B and W or something, or B and H. I don't know. I'll get a nice filter for it. I'll have to research what's good. And then this one here, this is another shot, and here are the specs. So ISO 200, 1/4000, f5.6. And let me look at the dimensions again. So this is cropped slightly. But let's punch in here. This is one where I had, I think, a depth of field issue because the plane is flying away from me. So I'm getting really sharp details here on the tail end. Like again, I can read this danger, arresting step or whatever, but you can see it starts to get soft towards the front of the plane. So my question is, particularly like right up in here, is this softness due to the depth of field, or is this a tiny bit of motion blur, either caused by the IBIS or me, right? So I'm not quite sure. And this is where, if you have a lot of experience with your camera lens combination, you can decipher this a little better. But I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing, right? Um, so that's that. And then I liked how the light was reflecting here on the bottom. I think that's from the airfield itself, because the runways and everything are pure, not pure white, but they're white concrete, right? It's very bright. So there's a lot of reflection coming off the ground. And so I just adjusted the white balance a little bit, then added this fake sky to it to make this kind of very surreal shot of the fighter jet. Again, it's just a creative license, right? And you know, a little bit of a smoke trail here, which is actually the clouds in the background, not the jet itself. But there was a tiny bit of, you could see a tiny bit of flame coming out in the raw image, but it's not showing here, obviously, because I picked a very orange sky to match the orange glow. Again, just creative license here. This Apache helicopter, and this was with the 12 to 40 Pro, so normal settings here. Aperture priority f4, so I was at 1/1000th ISO 200. And despite my 12 to 40 f4 Pro being a train wreck in terms of it's got spots and dust and everything inside from just mistreatment of it, it's still tack sharp. So if you go to my Flickr page and pick people on this, I think you'll be pretty impressed with the detail that you can get from this lens. And it's pretty amazing. There's fine print embedded into the helicopter. You can actually read it. You know, it's pretty amazing. Like this says the avionics bay. This over here says some number 5R47, utility light and ground, power receptacle, etc., etc. So this is your typical air show type shots, right? Just get down low to the ground, get a different perspective. I didn't have much opportunity to do anything creative because, you know, I for a little while during the lunch hour, right? Things are a little bit, the air show is going on all day, but they give you a little bit of time to eat without missing any kind of the really high profile action. And so it was difficult to for me to get any interesting creative shots of the planes on the ground. A lot of it had to do with there's just people everywhere, so I couldn't frame the shot without people in it. But there were other forms of other types of geometry and forms that I was seeing while I was crossing through different planes, because there were some huge planes there that my brain was just not in the creative mode. But I tried looking for shapes and forms and tried to do something kind of interesting with the geometry of the intersection of the wings and the fuselage, the intersection of two different planes and propeller. Just not my genre right now. I wasn't able to competently get anything good. I did try. Maybe if I get a chance, I'll show you a couple of those. This, of course, is the Coast Guard helicopter. Nothing to see here really, except that this motion blur of the blades I added in post-processing. So because my shutter speed was what, 1/2000th of a second, and so the blades were frozen. So I just added the motion blur. It's fairly convincing. It's not perfect, but that's what I did there. And then a couple other tips when you're shooting airplanes is try to stand in a part of the field where the airplanes, I mean, where you have to know where they're taking off and landing versus and then also where they're banking and making their turns. like this, so you can get the underside. I got a lot of belly shots, but then also the top of the plane. So when they're banking, you can get a more interesting shot or angle of the planes. Because if you're looking at a plane straight on, there's not much to see there. There's very little frontal surface area on these planes, mostly because they're not loaded down with bombs and ammo, right? They're just wings. So there's not much to see straight on. And even from the side, a profile, uh, there's not necessarily a lot to see. So try to think about, when they're banking. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times when they're banking, they're really far away. So you're going to need at least the f4 300, maybe with a teleconverter, and when they're that far away, there's a lot of atmospheric distortion too. So even if you can fill the frame or get a decent shot, uh, depending on the weather, like in the summertime, it's summer right now, there's a lot of distortion in the air from the heat and stuff and I think that's some of the problems I was having was I was getting a lot of atmosphere distortion from the heat off these planes. So some parts of the plane were not that sharp. So the winter air shows may be a better way to go uh, for sharper images, because there was a lot of heat distortion, atmospheric distortion, being the summer and everything. Okay, this is a parachuter. You can clearly see the guy's face. Like I said, this lens is amazing, and this combination. He was flying the POW, so this was a moment to remember those that have lost their lives or captured during wartime, and so that was a nice tribute. This shot here, I actually captured from my backyard yesterday. Not during the air show. It was during the air show, but from my backyard. And I cropped heavily on this image. But they didn't do this when I was there on Friday. I didn't see any P-51 Mustangs, unfortunately, for whatever reason. This is heavily cropped, so there's not a lot of fine detail in this. Because from my backyard, unless they're doing a low pass, they're really far away. This is almost directly over the airfield itself. And they're banking back towards the runway. But you can see the details are kind of mushed, right? And soft. And then if we look at here, I know this shot, I probably dialed in a +2 exposure comp. And then I still had to push shadows in post. And fake sky again. Here's a classic, right, shot. This is the actual sky. My white balance is a little off, but I got good detail on these planes. I think this shot came out really nice, and it's a classic. I gotta fix the white balance on this. It's a little bit too cold. A little bit warmer maybe. I just did an eyedropper white balance and then just called it. And this, I pretty much filled the frame. If we look at the dimensions, 3122. So it's probably 75% of the frame is filled on this one. And actually on the sides in the front, I'll show you the raw image. I actually added, well, maybe it wasn't this image, but one of the images I had to add more sky because I framed it where the tip of the nose was right at the edge of the frame, and the tail was right at the edge, so it was just looked ridiculous, right? So I added a little bit of negative space to the frame. And again, all these shots, you can see the settings are very similar. F4 or f5.6 at 1/4000th of a second, ISO 200. That's typical, plus or minus a couple of stops on the ISO, okay? That's it. So I didn't have to worry about shutter speed too much. This is another good shot, good detail. Something that I noticed though, you can read the numbers on the side. You can see some of the rivets and holes. This shot doesn't display well. I'll talk about that when we come across it. But this is another full frame shot, I think. Yeah, 3123. So again, this is pretty much 75% of the frame. Another good shot. This one I probably cropped. They were pretty far out. Oh, 3606. Okay, so this I filled the frame pretty well. But they're pretty far away because, you know, well, anyway, you can see it. This came out really well too. No depth of field issues at all because of their distance from where I was. But this is all 6 of the F-16s, and this is the belly. And did I? Yeah, this is the same thing, but they turned a little bit, so you can see more of the belly. Another nice clean shot, I think. Okay, this is where having very fast continuous shutter, like 25 frames per second, saved me, because I was able to choose from about 3 different frames of where this one plane is coming from, or position of this one plane in the frame. Because I had one where I had just the nose, a little bit here, then a little bit down here in the tail. So I had 3 or 4 frames I could choose from at 25 frames per second. And so again, pretty good detail here. I think, let me see what lens this was. Yeah, this is the 300 f4 Pro also. But yeah, I like this shot. And honestly, this is my favorite shot. It's very simple, right? But it's clean, nice detail everywhere. I mean, you can see the frickin' pilot's shades and everything. I just love this. I really like this shot. I like the position of the plane. It's a typical plane fighter jet portrait, right? I think the lighting is really good. So I was happy with this one. Personally, this is my favorite. And slight bump in ISO, so I probably dialed in a +1. We'll see when we get to the RAWs. This is the fisheye lens, and then I think I corrected for distortion. But this, you know, the 8mm fisheye Pro, amazing detail that you can get out of this lens. And this is cropped, okay, because the fisheye captured. I had to stand a little bit far back. They wouldn't let you into the cockpit, but so I was standing back probably about 3 or 4 feet from here. So I would say this cockpit was about 6 to 8 feet away from me. But I was still able to capture some really amazing detail. And this is an HDR shot, meaning I took 2 images, one to expose for the exterior and then one to expose for the interior. Because otherwise, this would have been completely blown out the sky, or I would have had a silhouette of the cockpit, you know, one way or the other. So I just did a HDR blend in Photoshop for this. Okay. This shot is okay. This was the fisheye lens also. Yeah, 8mm fisheye. So I just did your typical leading lines, reflections, right? We have the reflection here with the symmetry. So I stood front and center, and then I exposed it. Like, I think I added +1 exposure comp or something, and just took the shot. So your standard, you know, competent picture, right? It's a competent shot, nothing special, but it's competent, right? This shot didn't get a lot of love on Instagram, but this is also one of my favorite shots. And I like this because you can see the guy's face through the window. And he's doing something, and he's obviously one of the cameramen. Looks like he's shooting a Nikon. I'm just guessing. I saw a lot of DSLRs, like not mirrorless, but regular DSLRs out there. So a lot of I would say a lot of old school, not old school, but a lot of competent photographers, because when you go out with a DSLR, this is my impression of DSLR shooters. They have a very high skill set, and they don't need all the bells and whistles and technology that the cameras give us today. Now, I understand the DSLRs like Nikon had 3D tracking and some other autofocus. The autofocus was generally very good in those systems, but they didn't have like subject detect, right? They had generic type tracking and stuff at its most advanced level. So whenever I see a DSLR shooter, that's somebody that has a very high skill set and doesn't need anything else to get a good picture. They know exactly what to do. They're familiar with the camera. And this goes back to knowing what your camera and lens combinations are capable of. And this is something you only get through using it constantly and having a lot of experience. So I see a lot of I would consider DSLR shooters very experienced shooters, generally speaking. So I thought that was a cool shot. And this one, I did a sky replacement. I don't think it worked too well here, but otherwise it was just a white sky. And this was the 75-300 lens, I believe. Yeah, the 75-300. And I still got good detail out of it. But of course, the plane was like right in front of me practically. Like I said, maybe 100 feet away, if that. And this is one of their maneuver shots. This was really hard. I didn't get good detail out of it. And they were really far away when they split up. So each plane is taking up maybe 2% of the frame. So there's not a lot of detail. This is where maybe a super high resolution, like a Sony A1 with a 600 millimeter f4, would get the better shot of something like this. Same thing with this. They moved in a little bit closer, so now the detail's improving. My white balance is off, but this is a good shot. All right, so let's talk about this shot here. This is something that I did not. I think a more experienced photographer could have done a better job, because I didn't know they were going to do this, right? So this is a spray and pray moment. It's a 25 frames per second. I got this shot. But what I was doing is, you see this jet here in the background? I was actually trying to capture this, and I was panning on that particular fighter jet, that F-16. And during that sequence of shooting, this other F-16 crossed in front of it. I was not expecting that. So it's not framed. So you can see that this plane is framed almost in the center, right? But this plane is framed towards the bottom because I wasn't expecting this plane to come in. So I was panning for this plane here, and I had it pretty much centered framed in the center. But then when this one came across, there was two problems. One is it's framed at the bottom of the frame. So that's problem number one. Then problem number two is when you punch in, there's motion blur on the plane crossing in front. Versus if you look at the plane in the back, no motion blur, it's tack sharp, right? So this plane was crossing in the opposite direction I was panning in. And so that causes, this motion blur, because now I'm panning and the plane's going in the opposite direction of my panning. So it's now effectively going at least twice as fast as the plane that I was panning, right? So I don't know. I'm not sure how to handle this kind of shot. My guess would be a faster shutter speed, or if you know it's going to happen, try not to pan, but stand there and frame it before it happens. But it's hard. This is something I think takes a lot of skill, this kind of shot, to get both planes in focus. And I'm not sure exactly how to do it. Basically, my guess is not to pan and know where it's and predict where it's going to happen and get the shot. So you're not panning in any direction, and use a very, very fast shutter speed. Because I don't know what shutter speed would have froze this, without cranking your ISO up so high that, you wouldn't get the shot. So if we look at my specs here, I was already dialing in some exposure comp, because look at my ISO, it's up to 320. So I was probably +1 EV, 1/4000th of a second. But this was a tough shot, and this happens a lot. Not a lot, but this happens a lot during the air show, where planes are converging at different from different directions over the top of each other, in front of each other, in different formations. And this is something I think that if I was going to air shows every other week or every month, because they have them pretty regularly, but you have to travel all over the country to go see them. This is the only one local to me all year. Well, there was one other one that was only a couple hours away that I didn't even think about, but I think a very experienced photographer would have got this. So Topaz is not going to clean that up. I guess someone asked that. I tried. It didn't work out. This may be with Topaz applied even. But if we get to the image, I'll try and Topaz it for you so we can see. This will be a good image to test motion blur on Topaz, right? Because I do have it. Okay, this is an awesome shot. This is the one that I did add some of the negative space here in the front and in the back. And in the back, I just cloned the smoke trail to go back here a little bit more, because this shot was framed very, very tight. Again, 300 f4 Pro, but I got really good detail on this shot as well, as you can see. Now you see the name of the pilot is right here underneath the cockpit window, right? That's a little bit blurrier than I'd like. So, because I've seen shots where that thing is tack sharp with a D4, a 16 megapixel camera. So when I look at my images of the same subject against very, very skilled photographers that I've seen online, they're definitely doing a better job than me. Clearly, that's no question there. I think for my first go at this, I think I did a pretty good job. But when you pixel peep and you look at the fine details and things like that, I can definitely see areas where I think if I had a higher skill set, I would have got a little better shot than I'm able to here. But overall, I really like this shot. And again, this I added negative space. You can see a little bit here. It's a little bit of a line here that I need to clean up. Right in here, you can see a little bit of a seam. Over here, there's a little bit of a seam. But anyway, I had to add some negative space in front and back because they were just cropped in. I believe this was the 75-300 lens. So I'm at 215 millimeters. And this lens did a good job. I mean, a lot of this is the Photolab deep prime sharpening and optics and everything, but ultimately the detail is there, and it did a really good job. A little bit of a depth of field issue here on the nose, it looks like, potentially. Maybe not. But I think this shot came out really well. This shot here is interesting. Same settings. I was at +1 EV, most likely. But this is actually, this shot here is actually, and there's a couple of things going on here. This shot here, I should have dialed in +2 EV, it looks like, because I'm seeing a little bit of noise in the shadows. This is actually two shots that I combined in Photoshop and stacked to reduce some of the noise. So this is not a single shot. This is like a spray and pray, and I took 2 frames and blended them together in Photoshop to create a less noisier image. And also, and then process with deep prime and all of that, right? But if you look closely here, and this happens a lot, you know, the jet is right over the top of the other plane, so it's causing distortion, heat distortion on the plane below it. So this is another thing that nobody can fix, right? This is something that is just going to happen, so just be aware of that. If you're going to take a picture of a plane and you want that particular plane to be sharp, don't have it behind the jet stream of another plane because you're going to get distortion. And that happens kind of on and off through all my shots. This shot, this is a single shot. This shot is awesome, and I filled the frame with this one too. Yeah, virtually 75% of the frame is just cropped a little bit. But this shot has really good detail. And my problem with this particular shot, if you look at the nose and look at the print of the pilot's name underneath the cockpit, there's motion blur. Whereas back here, tack sharp. So I'm not sure if this particular plane right here that I have my mouse on is particularly bad. I think it's depth of field, because see how it gets softer here, a little less soft, and then here it's pretty sharp, and then here it's tack sharp. So it looks, but even here it's not quite. I'm getting sort of this double vision look here in the text. But I've seen images where the name is tack sharp. I'm not sure what's causing that. Either I'm over sharpening and post-processing, or it's a depth of field issue. I don't know exactly. It's a great shot, but it's not perfect, in my opinion. You know, I'm being very, very critical, right? But I just wanted to show you some of the very small things that I found as I was going through these. This shot, this has some motion blur in it. I got one that's a little better than this, but this is the first one I found. You know, like I said, I had to cull through 7,000 images. But there's motion blur. I think this one I did use Topaz motion blur, sharpen, whatever. It helped a little bit. But it's not a clean shot. It just looks okay. It's just kind of a neat shot, but it's not very good. This one, you can see the heat coming off the jets on the back, but again, look at all the heat distortion all over these planes. It's everywhere. And my guess is this is the heat from the summer. So while it looks like a good shot, when you get on close inspection, this has got 2 problems. I think this is depth of field and heat distortion at the same time. So it's just everywhere. I doubt there's motion blur because they weren't flying very fast, and I was at a very fast shutter speed. Okay, this is another one, spray and pray, that I got lucky and I got this shot. I didn't know this was going to happen, you know, because I couldn't hear the announcer over the sound of the jets, because he'll tell you what's going to happen. Time to time, I would say, okay, he would say, look over to your left. They're going to do this. This is one of those things, like if I went to a couple of these shows, I would get better at timing and not taking 1,000 frames to get one shot, right? With spray and pray. But this came out pretty good overall. Pretty sharp. I can read the name on the pilot's name there. Opposing solo. I can't quite read the name actually, but I'm almost there. Same thing here. Pretty good detail. A little bit of heat distortion. This is, of course, just a ground level shot. They weren't moving at all. But this is where, look at the nose, tack sharp, beautiful detail. I can almost see that if these are Phillips or flathead screwdrivers in the rivets, I don't know. But if you look at the name, I think I'm getting, if you look at the name and that along the line of this, the cockpit, I'm getting some heat distortion or depth of field blur. I don't know what it is, but the depth of field drops off pretty quick back here. And of course, this is heat distortion and depth of field. Yeah, opposing solo. So yeah, so that was the shot of the previous. I think this is the female pilot too. So this is the same plane right here, opposing solo. Plane number 6. Yeah, plane number 6. Yeah, fisheye cockpit again. I believe this one may have been a single shot. I don't think I may have done an HDR in this. I'm not sure, but the fisheye pro lens is amazing. Amazing lens. So sharp. I like this shot. This has really good detail, nice depth of field, and I think there's a good balance of the plane and the maintenance guy down there. And if we punch in, you know, you can see it says USAF threat. And again, good detail. And it's amazing how they polish these jets. They are so shiny. I mean, whoever detailed these jets and polished them, they're amazing. look at how clean these jets are. It's just, I mean, there is nothing going on here. It is clean. It's almost like they went over the whole plane with a toothbrush and got into every little nook and cranny. But I love this shot. But this shot here, you can see some heat distortion coming off the ground onto the maintenance crew here. And there's a slight depth of field. Because my focus point was here in the front. And again, this plane is almost 50 feet in length. And he's probably about 20 feet behind, like over here by the tire. So it's not quite tack sharp on him because I think of depth of field. But overall, I think the framing, this picture, I really like this picture. Personally, this is one of my favorites. This shot's okay. Nothing special. Again, sky replacement. And this is a tough plane to photograph because of the color, right? It's very dark. And this one, I think this one, yeah, this is tack sharp. My God. It's pretty amazing. When was this taken? September 16th. Okay, so I took this, I don't even know what today's day is. Today's 18th. Yeah, so I took this on Friday. I'm going to show you a couple of shots I got from my backyard. This is just a 300 millimeter portrait. One of the ground crew. This was a tough shot because this was grossly underexposed on the bottom. So I blew out the sky. There was no clouds in the sky anyway, so this is another fake sky. This is the B-25 bomber. And this you can see the propellers are frozen because I was at 1/4000th of a second. I tried to get some shots with propeller blur, but then the whole plane ended up being blurry. So my panning skill set is not there yet for these kind of images. This shot, yeah, I took this shot. It's more the same. Here you can see the heat distortion over the top of this plane. but otherwise, you know, very, very sharp. And I think this, I don't know why this is in here twice by mistake. Okay, that's it. So yeah, check out the Flickr. Like I said, you can download them for personal use if you just want to pixel peep a little bit. Let me see. Galleries. Now, last night I put together some images from other photographers. And let's see, this was taken with what? A Nikon Z7 with a 100 to 400 and a 1.4x teleconverter. So it's pretty close to a 600 millimeter, right? He's an equivalent. It'll probably tell you down here. Oh, it doesn't show. But this is like a 40, what, 2 or 47 megapixel sensor. I forget. It's 40 something, right? I don't know how close he was, but I don't see anything in this image that's really any better than the images I took. So a little depth of field here, out of focus. But excellent shot, excellent shot, excellent camera and lens. I mean, I think Dave here did a great job. I'll give him a little like here. I think he did a great job with this. Let's see what else we got. This shot was EOS R6, another good camera. I forget how many megapixels this one is, but they're at f9. Okay, look at the shutter speed on this one. He's at a 400 millimeter equivalent, or not equivalent. He's at 400 millimeters, and 1/640th of a second ISO 100 f9. So it was bright. It was bright out there. And then if we punch in and look at the detail, not bad. Not bad at all. Really good shot. So this was partially probably a spray and pray, but I have to say this person has a very high skill set as well. Another excellent shot. Oh, same guy, Dave. Z7, same lens, 1/2000th of a second, ISO 500 f8. So pretty much the same as my Olympus, right? Because I'm at 600 millimeter f4. But he's got twice as many megapixels. But let's punch in. And I think this is where, if you look at the cockpit and the lettering on the cockpit, it's so crisp. Look at the flags. This is where I think this is where having a high megapixel count, makes the difference, right? Certainly there's noise and everything that can be easily cleaned up. But this is an excellent image. So if you go to my Flickr page, I put these in a gallery so you can look at these for comparison. Yeah, good job on this one. Apparently this plane is landing or taking off. My guesses would be it's landing because of the angle, right? Bernie, what did he use? Canon EOS 5D Mark IV, 300 millimeter with a 2x teleconverter. So this is 600 millimeter at f5.6. Look at the shutter speed, though. This is what I'm impressed with. And this is why I say these are photographers that have very good panning skills, right? And this camera, I don't think this camera has IBIS or anything. But yeah, really good detail everywhere. Even at a quarter of the shutter speed I was using. And so this is a pretty impressive image, right? Really good job. I don't know what a 5D Mark IV resolution is. I just don't know these other cameras. But this is a great example of, somebody with a very high skill set, I think, to be able to shoot at that shutter speed and still get a tack sharp image. It's got nothing to do with the gear, clearly. And then another nice shot by Bernie here. Same thing. He's at 600 millimeters f 6.314. Yeah, this is a shot anybody could do with an iPhone, really. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but that doesn't really require a skill set. How about Omar? What did he use? A 5D Mark IV, 100 to 400. Yeah, not a great shot. Good timing, but just the quality and the resolution's not there. EOS 70D with a 400 millimeter. See, this is where this is a competent shot. But anyway, that's enough of that. What time is it? I've been talking for an hour. So let me catch up on the chat, and then we'll go look at some raw files if you guys want. Let me know in the comments or chat section if you want to look at some raw files. I'll be happy to show you those. Okay, just starting from the bottom. I was handheld the whole time. I should have brought a monopod, at the very least, a monopod. I think that would have made a difference in some of the shots. But I tried to, I felt like I was bringing too much already. So I wanted to keep it very light, very simple. I brought 4 lenses and a camera body. I also brought my vlogging camera, but I just couldn't vlog. It was so loud. You wouldn't be able to hear me. And I wouldn't be able to, I had to put all my concentration on just the air show to figure out where planes were coming from and stuff. And Plato says, yes, show us the raw. Okay, I'll show you the raws. Let me just catch up on some of the chat. So give me about 5 minutes, and then we'll go into the raws. Dang it. My dying eye. It's amazing I can see it all. I can't read nothing this. If the planes were flying this close to me, I would not gotten any shots. I hope everyone's blocked this one visitor by now. I can't do it from this particular app. Randy's here. Mark Wolf, Plato. Too old for. Oh my goodness, too old for toys. Man, you've been a subscriber on my channel since the day one, I think. How have you been? And then maybe I have both eyes open. So that was the other problem. It was so bright out. I was standing there with switching eyes left and right like this because it was just so bright. I had my hat on, but I would have had a hard time keeping both eyes open, panning. That's a good idea, but it was so bright. I don't think I could have done that because I was 90% of the time I was standing around like this or like this, like just squinting and keeping one eye closed. It was so bright out and loud. It was just totally different experience. It was great. I loved it, but it put a toll on me, man. I was so tired. I was there for about 5 hours. And 8-Bit Ed is here. And Annette Johnson, good to see you. I'm sorry, not Johnson, Johansson. I'm sorry. Let's see. I used to think DSLR meant good photographer. Then went to elementary school and saw every mom with one and changed my mind. That's funny. That's true. You don't know what kind of photographer they are based on the camera. I mean, I'm just making assumptions. But when I see it, they're not buying the latest gear and all that. They're using what they know. Yeah, this is so true. After it's over, you have all these ideas. Oh, I didn't show you the ones that I took just from my backyard. We'll look at those before we go to the raws. It's only like 4 pictures. Marco's here. Druid's here. Awesome. Thank you, John. Stunning shots. I appreciate that. I tried hard. I definitely would be better after a few more goes at it. I think I would be a world-renowned aviation photographer. I'm exaggerating. Of course not. It takes more than a couple of air shows to get really good at this, right? And then Ken says, I use the 40 to 150 f2.8 with a teleconverter, and for prop planes, my shutter speed is 1/250th. And if combined with a jet, I can get away with 1/500th. And for jets, yeah, see, Ken is good. I could not do that. I could try a few shots at 1/1600th, but I was just in this like it was so bright out. 1/4000th of a second was not an issue. But I could see where if it's a little bit cloudy, because there wasn't a cloud in the sky, you might be forced to use 1/1600th of a second just to keep your ISOs down. But yeah, Ken is probably an awesome airshow guy. And Marsha's here. Good morning. Music Sound Gear, Lasse, Gee Whiz. Thanks for coming in. I see here you're new to the stream. I appreciate it. I've been to Hawaii once. I loved it there. It's awesome. And let's see. John follows. Tom Zazauskis. Jeff Painter. Good to see you. Fungi Time in the UK. Melvin Thomas. Yeah, that's actually kind of interesting photography, because it's close-up photography, not necessarily macro, but there's so much texture and color and shapes and forms of fungi that make it such an interesting area of photography or genre that I think I really should do more of, or would like to do more of. It's definitely awesome. David Tellick, good to see you. I've done a little bit, but not much. And Darko says you go to shoot some Cessnas. Yeah, it's all good. Planes are planes. I mean, granted, the F-16s and the Thunderbirds are something special. It's really amazing, because when I wasn't taking pictures, things were happening, and so I missed a lot of shots because I didn't know they were going to do that. But a couple of things I did see without getting shots of were really amazing. And like these 4 jets crisscrossed each other with a smoke stream, so it created this X pattern smoke trail. And then another jet came in from a perpendicular angle and went right through the center of that X. That was pretty cool. Okay, so I think I've caught up on the chat. Oh, Randy shot the Angels. Yeah, the Blue Angels come out sometimes too. I got shots of them with like a pocket camera years and years ago, like 10 years ago, but I don't know where they are now. Oh my God, the Great Vanzini. You got a scan, so I assume you shot with film. Wow. Crazy. And Randy says tripods and monopods are too restrictive. Okay. So maybe not. I was thinking a tripod would have helped. Particularly with video. tripod would have helped, because my camera was, I mean, the IBIS is amazing in the cameras, but at 300 millimeters, you know, if I moved too quickly one way or the other, it was a mess. So I'm thinking a monopod more for the video side of things. All right, let me show you one or two more pictures, and Richard said he used the one. Yeah, 100 to 400 would have been perfect for the air show, because like I said, I'd have to go up to the front of the line, then move back further to try to get the framing. And by the time I moved back, the maneuver was over and I missed the shot. So I would say 80% of the time, the 300 millimeters perfect. But there was about another 20% of the time that I was like, I gotta move back. I gotta keep moving back, and I missed some shots. Okay, so let me show you just a couple of more quick shots, and then we'll go to the raws. Yeah, this one was from my backyard. Of course, I did sky replacement, right? That's a backyard shot. Okay, 1/1000th of a second. So this is me practicing. I didn't know what I was doing. I must have been an aperture priority or something, because look at the ISO. But good detail nonetheless. But I'd say this was luck, right? Let's see what the shutter speed is here. 1/2000th of a second. Wow. At f5.6, and I still got these tack sharp. Again, sky replacement, just ignore that. I think I would have had to been at 1/4000th anyway, because it was so bright. I'm at 1/1000th of a second. Oh, that's the same picture. What was this one? 1/4000th. So when I was practicing in my backyard, where is when I was practicing in my backyard, you know, I didn't know what to do, so I was experimenting a little bit, and I ended up saying, looking at the images from practicing in my backyard, I said 1/4000th of a second, because I was getting motion blur a lot of the times. And we'll look at a couple of those as well. But here, let's look at the raws. There's some shots I haven't even processed yet, like this one. That's a B bomber of some type. Look at this shot. This is where's the EXIF data? Okay, f22. Oh my god. Yeah, so it's why is maybe it's in here. Let me look at this. I process most of them in Photolab 5. I just use Lightroom for this kind of stuff. I use Lightroom for importing and organizing. Let's take where's that shot that was at ISO 800? This one here. This was the first one we looked at. So I'm going to try and expand this so you guys can see. All right, so this is the processed image, right? So you can see all of the detail, everything I did. And this was ISO 800. And the raw image, let's see, 2182. DxO. Here's the raw, the .orf, right? Let me make sure I didn't. Let me reset this. There's the raw image. So I dialed in +2 EV. Hence, that's why I'm at like ISO 800, 1/4000th of a second. But that's, you know, there's the noise that you can see. It's very subtle, but all the detail is there. Hence, you know, that's why this was a very easy image to process for DxO, right? Deep prime and all that. And I wonder if I can do this. I'm gonna have to, let me synchronize this folder real quick, because those images should be in the same folder. Then I can show you side by side. DxO doesn't let you do side by sides. Of course, this image I didn't have to do much. It was just a very clean image. There was one image we wanted to try to do a motion blur thing, right? I think it was when the planes were crossing overhead. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, here's the raw. So if we do export and we pick topaz, sharpen. Why are my undersides? I was using center weighted metering. So I think I think that's, if I use spot metering, I'd probably run the risk of not metering the sky instead of the plane. So I left it on center weighted, and then I use subject detect. And I don't believe the metering ties to the subject. I have to do more testing on that and see. Again, this is where I need to learn my camera a little bit more. I could not open the image. This is just a simple raw. What did I do wrong? Edit, export files without processing. Let me try one more time. So I was, it won't open. I'm sorry, guys. Let's try a different image. This one had a little bit of motion blur in it, I believe. Yeah, this one has a little bit. So export. If my topaz sharpen stopped working, that's going to be a problem. Could not open image. Please contact support. Okay, I don't know why my topaz is not working today. What if I do it? Maybe it's just oh, this synchronized. I can do side by sides now. Once we get in, go back to Lightroom, I can do side by sides raw versus the process, because the process images are TIFF files. and that's what I ended up exporting. I really like Topaz Sharpen AI, except for the very high ISO images with a lot of noise. Then the Topaz denoise works better, but in my opinion, DxOD prime works better than the Topaz denoise. But denoise is Topaz a little bit more flexible with file types and things. There's no perfect software, just like there's no perfect camera, right? Okay, let's go back to Lightroom. Oh, it hasn't finished synchronizing. Once that's done synchronizing, let me close this file. Take some load off my computer. I guess that's it. All right, we'll give that a minute to synchronize. Yeah, the old World War II planes. Yeah, I would have. Yeah, I wish I could have saw the P-51. Maybe I forget the other plane, but it's a twin engine fighter plane that was really interesting. And then the B-29 bomber, of course, right? Then the B-25 is nice. There's a lot of interesting World War II planes, and they're very, very capable for just using a propeller. It's just amazing. I think the Royal Air Force had Spitfire. That was a really neat plane. Had that oval wing shape. Okay, it's still importing. So, you know, I just kept, I used to be into planes when I was a kid, right? So I was always like, I was model building, and me and my buddy used to always play with the little model planes, you know, the F-18s and, but most of them were not the F-18s, but most of them were like mostly the World War II type planes. And, but I can't remember anything now. It's been so long. Okay, they're importing. David. Oh, hey, David. How you doing? Did you make it out to the air show at all? Photo AI. Yeah. I'm gonna go to that live edit with you, Dave. If you do it on YouTube, I can, you know, I can let people know. But if it's gonna be through the meetup group, then you guys have to join the meetup group and go that way. It's the Virginia Beltway Photography Club on meetup.com. Okay, it's imported. All right, so let me go back to here. Let's go to folder and let me double asterisk these so it's easier to find. 1 second. Previous import. We'll make this yellow. Okay, so 21 images. Make these yellow and a double star. Oh no, let's not do that. I think yellow is good enough. So let's go to folder and library. All right, so here's a raw image. This is the B-29, I believe. So I did 1/800th of a second. So the image on the left obviously is the raw unprocessed image, I believe. Let me just make sure. Yeah, so this is unprocessed here on the left. On the right is processed with the DxO. And if I back off, you can see how underexposed this was. And I believe I actually I dialed in at least a one stop exposure. Let me see. Oh, I dialed in 2/3 of a stop exposure comp, so not enough. That's why it's underexposed. And then I tried to bring back some of the detail as much as I can. So this was one of the tougher shots. My shutter speed, I didn't pan too well, so I'm getting motion blur. I'm not getting good detail because it's underexposed, et cetera, et cetera. This is really a terrible shot. It's fine for Instagram and Facebook, but this is not a shot that I would print because the detail and everything is terrible. Let's go to this. Here's the 75 to 300. So this is the 75 to 300. The raw image on the left. This is a base ISO. So you can see it's just a tiny bit soft. I don't think it missed focus. I think this is the lens itself. And the DxO with the optics module and the deep prime, cleaned up the sharpness and brought a lot of the detail back. At least, good contrast now, right? So we can see everything. But yeah, I think it did a great job there. And let's see. Look at this. This is where's I don't think I shared this one. So there's the raw on the left. Is it? Yeah, it's not been processed. Yeah, this is why I didn't share it. There's motion blur here. Even though I'm at 1/4000th of a second, it's awful. So I probably didn't spend much time with this one. This is one I actually did use. Let's see, number 194. So here's the raw. There's the processed. So if we punch in, I think it came out pretty good, considering how underexposed it was. Let's go to 100%. So you can see there was a little bit of light here and here. So when I pushed the shadows, I just accentuated that with contrast and stuff. And then I added the sky. So I got that image there. I thought that came out pretty good. And let's see, this one I dialed in +1 exposure comp. That you can see right here. This is a +1. And let's look at this one I dialed in +2. So there's the finish, there's the raw. This image came out really good though. So let's swap these. So I had to dial in +2 exposure comp. And then I was able to get a good exposure on the jet itself, and then the DxO optics and deep prime, along with the basic sky replacement. I was able to bring out a lot of detail and contrast, in other words. But yeah, this is where the plane was kind of panning with a really strong backlighting, even though there's some sun here hitting the top. It was The lighting was just unbelievable sometimes. Here's another one. Here's the raw. Here's the final image. And what did I do? This is another one I dialed in +2 exposure comp. And this came out pretty good. A little bit. I purposely didn't try to bring these highlights back because I like the form and the textures here. But I'm pretty sure I could have recovered those highlights. But yeah, this came out really good. A little bit of depth of field issue or motion blur. It's not tack sharp. Because if we look at the lettering here, it's not bad. But there's the raw. So now with the sky replacement, you do that in Photoshop. That's actually a sky I took with my own camera. So I took some pictures with my 300mm f4 because I wanted the clouds to have the same perspective as whatever I was taking a picture of. So when you do sky replacement, take pictures using different lenses that you have so that they have the same kind of perspective or field of view as the image you're taking. So if you take some pictures with, say, your 25mm lens, and then you take pictures of a landscape using your 25mm lens, and you want to do a sky replacement, you want to use the skies that you took with the same lens so that you have sort of that same perspective or field of view and everything looks balanced. So that's why the sky, in my opinion, looks pretty well adjusted, or it looks natural to the image, because I use the same lens that I used to take of the airplane as I did the sky. All right. Oh, you weren't able to get to the air shot. Hopefully your arm is okay. Did the doctor say you can't go? Because I know yesterday they closed down early, so you have to go early. And is F-22 still the best fighter? I guess on paper it is. In practice, it is not, from what I've read. Here I was trying to do this. This might be one of my creative shots, I'm going to have to edit that, maybe try some black and white. I want to find that shot. These are raws. Oh, hey, I didn't show this one yet. I got to process this one. See motion blur on the plane on the left because I was panning this plane on the right. Damn it. So this is something a very skilled aviation photographer could probably get perfectly, but I could not. Here's a shot that's only +1 EV, but you see how the tip of the nose is on the end, and this side is very tight as well. So what I did was, I don't know why isn't the process image showing? This is one of the pictures I believe I added some negative space to fill the frame a little bit. This image here. Let's see if we can get this to go into topaz sharpen. Let's try that. Because this was the image that had motion blur, right? Down in here. Let that load in. See this motion blur? I don't think it's going to fare well. I think the larger letters on the wings will look good, but I don't know about the so let's go down here. We'll give that a moment to process. Okay, not bad. Not bad. It's still like this wing, it did a good job. But the lettering here, it improved it, but it's still not perfect. But not bad. Okay. How'd it do over here? Not so great. But down in here, I mean, I guess I could try and crank this up a little bit, but that might make it worse. It's not bad. It didn't jack up this image up here, right? This should be still tack sharp. Let's give that a second to process. So there's before, there's after. It did okay. I mean, it's like something you could probably just share on Instagram and not be and be okay. But it's not an image you want to pixel peep, because you can see, you know, some of the artifacts from the motion blur AI. But it did a great job here on the wing, I think. How about on this emblem here? Oh, nice. Really nice. So win for Topaz Motion Blur, Sharpen AI. I think it did a good job. So I need to reprocess this image maybe with Topaz Motion Blur. It looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and apply this as is, and then I'll reprocess it later. Oh, I got one of these shots too. Nice. Motion blur though. Oh. See, why is this image soft with motion blur? And it looks like it's a little out of focus too. I mean, I could process that to make it cleaner, but oh, here it is. Here it is. Here's the raw. So let me show you this one. This is where I added some negative space. So you see how the nose here of this first plane is right at the edge of the frame. I just added some negative space here and a little bit in the back. I made this trail a little bit longer here. And that's the image I got. So if I bring this in, now you can see a little clearer. And then I processed it. So if we punch in, I think the process, and this I used just DxO. I didn't use Topaz or anything. And this is why I love DxO. I mean, it's very, very consistent. I know what results I'm going to get. Topaz definitely can do a better job sometimes. Like on that motion blur shot, you know, DxO would not handle that at all. It's not designed for that. But, you know, consistency is you know, helps me a lot. When I can know what result I'm going to get, then it helps me with my workflow. Whereas with Topaz, it can be a little unpredictable. And that's why I just find it a little awkward to use. But it's definitely a tool I think you should have in your toolbox is the Topaz Sharpen AI, because it does fix motion blur time to time, and it does a really good job. Like I think it did an 8 out of 10 job on that one airplane we looked at. It's not a perfect 10, but 8 out of 10 ain't bad, you know, in my opinion. So but yeah, this is where I added negative space. This was easy to do. I could have just tacked on another sky replacement to give it a little more ambience, but I think this shot came out pretty good. So anyway, I think you guys get the idea of the RAWs. You really need to dial in +2 exposure comp if you have auto ISO, or you have to control the exposure manually in full manual mode. This RAW is really clean. I mean, I filled the frame, and I think I got really good detail everywhere. Oh, I can actually read the names here. Where's the processed image? Because this is sharp. Hold on. Where's the image that I processed? Because I felt like the processed image wasn't quite as good. That's not the processed image. Because maybe the processing is what's causing some of the, you know, just the over sharpening. It's a little bit, yeah. It's the processing. The processing is causing this. So I'm gonna have to see if I can mask this out a little better. Well, anyway, I'll figure it out. Because the original image, yeah, it's a little bit soft, but it's definitely, I can, how do I zoom in more? I think I gotta do it this way. See, that's clear. And then if I develop this and just add a little bit of texture, clarity, and then some sharpening. Yeah, that's better. Dang it. Okay, so some of the problems I'm having is my processing. it's not the lens or motion blur or IBIS or anything. Brandon Cooper. So I can read the names now. This is the lady pilot, plane number 2. Looks no, sorry. Those are the technicians, the people that work on the planes. Yeah, down here I'm getting sort of that double lettering. This is probably from depth of field, but anyhow, we'll wrap it up here in a few minutes, I guess. Is the F-22 still? They stopped making it. They discontinued it. Air Force is not going to make anymore. Well, I guess technically it has a higher payload, and from what I remember, it does have a higher payload, so it can carry more. But it's effectively the same as the F-16 in terms of performance, if I remember correctly. But the biggest problem with the F-22 was the cost of the plane itself. They're like $1 billion, whereas like an F-16 is $30 million, right? So it's a huge difference in price. And even if the cost of buying the plane made sense, the maintenance cost was very, very high on that plane. versus say an F-16. An F-16 is very low cost to buy, very low cost to maintain, versus the F-22 is extremely high cost. So it had some capability that the F-16 does not. I imagine similar to the F-35. But they said it's primarily the cost of the plane was prohibitive to continue buying them. I think they said they have 180 F-22s. 150 will remain in service, but they're not going to buy anymore. And eventually, I guess they will take them offline altogether once the F-35s ramp up and they get those in line. So, but I don't know, in a dogfight, which plane would win. They're both probably very capable. But I think the F-22 has some other capabilities that the F-16 does not. I think primarily do with payload. And it might be also able to like land on an aircraft like an F-18. So it's got some more versatility. But I don't know. You can read about it. I'm not the right person to ask about these things. I'm just regurgitating what I read. And I may not be regurgitating it properly, accurately. It's the software. Yeah. I'm going to have to look into that. I'm going to have to inspect my processing a little bit because a lot of the images I have, I'm having that kind of issue. I attribute it to heat distortion, but I think looking at that one image is definitely not heat distortion. It's the processing. So the T-Birds are always a good show. The Blue Angels are even better back in the day. Yeah. I'll have to find my Blue Angel pictures. Like I said, I think I took that with a pocket camera. But I was on a boat, so they were flying really low over the boats from the Naval Academy in Annapolis. Okay, cool, David. Your arm's getting better. Ooh, check my Raptors on Flickr. Okay, definitely. Let's take a quick look. I assume you're talking about the fighter jets. Or you're talking about these birds. Cool. Oh, you took that with the D750. You're getting more use out of D750 than I ever have. Nice. And this, what lens was this? The 300 f4. I thought you said you were selling that. Very, very nice. Yeah. That's cool. Oh, I like that one. Oh, that's an awesome shot. Oh, EM1X with a 40 to 150. Did I just like the shots shot by Olympus versus your D750? Wow, you were really close, though. Man, nice and sharp, though. Because you're only at 40 millimeters. What'd you take this with? Oh, the D750. Okay. D7. Oh, this was the EM1X. Nice. With a 40 to 150 at 40 millimeters. Man, they must be like standing almost on your shoulder. Wow. Very nice, Randy. We'll check these out. Okay. Said I wore a glove and they landed on my glove. What an experience. That is cool. Man. All done through photo AI. Okay. So I guess you and David were talking about photo AI, or David's been talking about it anyway. And I have to check it out. I guess we'll have David come on maybe next week or during the week and talk about it. It'd have to be on a weekend because you have a day job now, right? But okay, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up here. I guess unless there were any other questions about the air show or taking pictures, I shared everything I know, which isn't much, and the images and the raws. And like I said, you can go to Flickr and pixel peep them. Apparently, I have some more processing to do to get them just right. Because today, digital photography is not just about taking the pictures right, but also the post processing is very important. And I definitely made too many assumptions about using in the post processing. Like I just assumed that it wasn't the processing, but it was. So I need to explore that a bit more. I don't normally pixel peep anyway, but for these shots I did because I really wanted them to be as good as possible. Being my first time out, right? So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. My experience there. I'll see if I can make a little 5-minute video and talk about that and share some of the shots. And so you don't have to sit through a 2-hour stream to get the same thing, I guess. Because my streams really, if you compress them down to just the meat, it's about a 5 or 10-minute stream, right? But I appreciate you guys being here. You guys have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you next week.